Okay.
which would reduce the
Ready?
cost.
Good morning. It is 9 o'clock. We're in the Commissioner Chambers. We have a full...
Did you have to do much of that in this case?
I did.
Did you say there were 20 or 21 or something?
21 changes specifically to prevent, I'm bringing up my online
Yeah.
map now. Yeah, a second.
And I don't need you to go through the map. I just
Yeah.
want to make clear that that doesn't do anything to change any of the city's chosen boundaries. It
No, in
doesn't-
fact, we're
doesn't
obligated.
change. Well, let me finish if I could. It doesn't change anything is the point that I'm making, other than it makes your elections process more efficient, cleaner, and more consistent with past practice.
In fact, we're obligated by RCW to make sure that each precinct is within a legislative boundary, a congressional boundary, a city boundary, and a county commission district.
Exactly. Yeah.
So-
Thank you.
And there are other, I guess we also want to make sure that precincts also fit within the council districts as sort of a recommendation to make administration easier.
Right,
for voting.
yeah. Well, the elections process is complex enough without having people across different boundaries voting on elections that, are outside their precinct, so, or outside their district.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Well, Commissioner, I just want to let you know that I had a chance to talk to City Manager Adam Lincoln and also City Attorney Eric Ferguson, who's in the room today. And when I exchanged some emails with Eric, who is glad to speak today on the topic, he expressed it's really necessary, we move this forward, to get the election process going. But, in all transparency's sake, he's here to answer any questions on behalf of the city. And but I wanted to make you aware that Eric is here.
And I viewed that commissioner, or that city council meeting when they presented that night, and there was even some of the other, there was 3 or 4 people that were very surprised because they had no idea the maps were redrawn and the configuration they were in, and they were very upset that they weren't included in the process. But they were also told that if they don't pass that night, they could get sued. So it was sort of like a forced approval.
I'd just like to add, I guess for the record at this point, I've listened to the comments of my fellow commissioner and others, and I want to be clear, at least on my own personal view, which is the county has no voice in these boundaries. This is the appropriate authority of the legislative body of Pasco. I respect that authority. I don't question it publicly, and any suggestions of gerrymandering, I think, are frankly out of order, and want to be clear on the record that I don't support any of that discussion. We have a duty to respect the decision of the Council of Pasco, whether we personally agree with it or not. Thank you.
Anybody else for public comment? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve Resolution 2023-121 as presented.
Second.
Been a motion and a second for Resolution 2023-121. With no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Next, we'll move down to requesting replace a building inspector 2 with a second building inspector 1. Derek. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a request to when I came with the budget, based on the things that were going on in the housing market, I'm sorry, the 2023 budget, based on the situation with the housing market, we projected that we'd be relatively slow. However, it's turning out that we are in need of hiring our second building inspector, but we don't need a building inspector 2. Building inspector 2 requires certain certifications and responsibilities and plan, and they kind of act in the role of the building official if the building official's out for some reason or something like that. Currently, we don't have staff that's at that level. Word on the street from other agencies that are seeking building inspectors has been pretty much what you get is you train them. There aren't a lot of availability. And finally, we don't really need a building inspector 2. We need a building inspector 1, hence the request to amend this. At the time that I should have staff or a situation where we believe that it would be appropriate to request a building inspector 2 position to be reassigned to the department, we would bring that to the board at the time of budgeting. But we don't see that position being needed for at least a couple years, just primarily because it takes 2 to 5 years for a building 1 to reach that level of expertise. Could get lucky in the hiring process, but the reality is, based on our past experience, it's those folks aren't out there. The experienced hit the ground running building inspectors. So, hence the request. We need the body, but we don't need that level of expertise, because Mike that will free up my building's official to actually be in the office doing the building official work primarily, and then freeing up a couple other. And we do have a staff person who is qualified and would be able to step into that position.
So, Derek, appreciate the way you've approached this. You going to a lower cost position, which saves the county some money and fits your needs better. Just a couple of questions. One, you don't need a inspector 2 today, but you do need one eventually.
Most likely, yeah, but we're talking probably like a year or 2.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there no mechanism available to you to hire somebody into a inspector 2 as a inspector 1 in a I don't want to say in a training role, but you get what I'm saying, and once you meet certain requirements and you advance to the 2, is that sort of tool available to you? Do you know?
I don't know specifically that. What happened, the reason we're here is that was the initial. I was like, we can just hire. We're budgeted for 2, but we were informed that no, you're budgeted for 1 and 1 2.
And so you couldn't meet the requirements for the 2, and therefore you couldn't fill the position. You couldn't find an applicant who met the 2 requirements. Well, I'm happy to support it the way you've requested it. It seems to me if there is not, there should be a mechanism where you can hire somebody in as a 1 on 1 qualifications, and when they meet the fully qualified for 2, be able to promote them without having to come back and ask for a budget increase. Your call whether you want to revisit this with HR, but I think that's an entirely doable thing. Your call. I'll support it if this is what you want to do, but I do think it's worth going back to HR and asking that question.
If it's okay with the board, I would like to do this, take the time to make sure we get that set up correctly, but I do have an imminent need for the position, so I'd like to proceed as presented, and
Okay.
then I think we would be able to set some, because I'm not aware of that process being available currently.
I think it
and-
is, but, this is your department, and I'm happy to respect your wishes.
Okay, is there any further discussion?
I have a question for Dwayne. Didn't we go through something very similar to this? And is it possible to keep that position open so we don't go through through the same process
Yeah,
again.
we went through this exact same position by eliminating the two, which in his in the last sentence of the first paragraph, he talks about the elimination of the two, and that's what Commissioner Peck was referring to. This exact same thing happened in the assessor's office just recently, and we've got the chief accountant here. We can just literally move that money to the one position, correct? And you don't have to eliminate the two, and then the two would be available, and we could budget to it when appropriate.
The salary and benefit budget is budget by position.
Tim, would you mind coming up to the mic so everybody can hear you, please? Thank you.
We budget by position, but ultimately, when you look at the budget as a whole, it's just one lump sum amount. It's not divided up to individual positions. So I don't think there's, I mean, if it's the wishes of the board, I don't think there's a huge issue with, you don't really need to, as long as there's money available, you don't need to really move from one position to another.
Well, in this particular situation, he's actually saving the county money. So this budget transfer could have been done by the county administrator, correct?
For,
Transferring that from the two to the one position.
yes, and I mean, ultimately, I mean, if it's just position to position, it's all within salaries and benefits, so there really
I
doesn't,
think that's the mechanism.
there wouldn't
that
really
Commissioner-
need to be a transfer
Yeah,
necessarily.
that's not actually what I'm talking about at all. That second grade one position doesn't exist. If it did, then certainly you could just move funds from the grade two position to the step one. But Derek's problem is that he only has one position and a 1-2 position. What he could do is create a second building inspector one position and simply not fill, but keep the grade two, because as you said, it's a bottom line budget on the personnel side, so he wouldn't have the funds to fill the two and the additional one, but he'd have the flexibility to choose which of those he wanted to fund. So I think the simplest mechanism, if I were you, if I may, I would create a second inspector one and just not fill the two until you need it. And at that point, you've got it and you can fill that. And now the one of the inspector ones will have to be vacant because you won't have the budget for it. That's I think the cleanest, simplest, and gives you the most flexibility.
And that was our original theory, is we would just move in and but that's what we were notified, that this was the process that we had to do. But no, what you've just described would be much preferred. If that's something, I can take this back, get that kind of fixed up, bring it back to you next week. Or is that something that can be done now by declaration or consent?
Well, I don't want to be premature on a motion, but once the board has asked its questions, I'll be happy to formulate a motion to approve that.
That would be appreciated.
Okay.
Is there any other discussion?
No, I just think that's the simplest form, so we're not readdressing this again at a later date.
I agree. So do we
Not
need to
hearing
take-
any other questions, Mr. Chairman, I'd move that the board authorize Mr. Bratton, as the Director of the Planning Department, to create an additional building inspector position to be a building inspector one, to go with his currently existing step one and step two building inspector positions, recognizing that his budget will limit his ability to fill all three of those, but this gives him the option of determining which two he can afford to fill out of his budget.
Second?
Been a motion and a second for a creation of a building inspector one position. All with no other further discussion, all in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you, Derek.
Commissioner, forgive me for
Yes.
cutting you off, but our clerk, Karen Milham, has informed me we had a power outage at the beginning of our meeting, so the first 10 minutes did not record, so we're going to need to redo the approvals of the minutes and warrant registers. So just for the public, and it's on the record, and, just in case somebody wants to see it.
All right, so we just do that right now, and then we'll get
So
right-
it's on the consent agenda.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know that you need to redo and vote on them. I think the chair can simply brief that these were motioned and approved appropriately.
All right, well, I'll mention that the approval of the meeting minutes from January 24th were approved. The approval of warrants and rosters, we had one. Mr. Mullen, would you give the amount for the approval of the,
Mr. Chairman, it was fund expenditures, $816,533.77.
okay, and then the consent items 1 through 7 were approved. So did we miss the proclamation that was read too?
I don't think anybody would want me to read that again, but I'd be more than glad to.
You were very good the first time. Why don't we continue on with the, so item D, the ARPA Memorandum of Understanding with Benton County Council of Governments has been postponed till next week, but I would like to ask for a presentation. The last time they presented was last March 22nd of last year on the Council of Governments, and I would like to invite them to come in and present and maybe have a discussion on this item on May 2nd. So with that, we'll move down to item E, which is the Memorandum of Understanding Agreement between Benton and Franklin counties for the allocation of juvenile justice center operations, facilities, construction, usage, and cost and ownership, presented by Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Commissioner. This is something that we've been talking about for quite a while. This is the update on the MOU for the Juvenile Justice Center. It concerns topics such as ownership, funding formulas. The center was built in 1979. There was some upgrades in 96, but myself and Commissioner Mullen recently toured the facility, and it is in desperate need of funding and being fixed up. So Benton County is going to dedicate $21 million in ARPA funding to get that fixed up. We were going to contribute $7 million, but we simply didn't have the funding. So, so essentially what's happening in exchange for them fronting all the costs, we are going to sign a quitclaim deed, relinquishing any ownership possibilities in that. I've coordinated with several staff members, including Sean Sant. I've talked to Jared McPherson from over at Benton County, several jail officials, Will McKay, and it's clear to me that we have no ownership interest in that building. There was a triangular parcel that was in question. We don't have any ownership stake in that, so Dwayne and I have really turned over every rock on this, Commissioners, and we are quite certain, we don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth, that they're going to fix this up. And there's even provisions in there that we can leave the contract within 10 years if, we start to plan our own juvenile justice facility. So I think it gives us some flexibility, it gives us some options, and quite frankly, I think our consultant would agree it's a fair contract and offer. So I recommend that we move forward and we sign this MOU.
Questions, Commissioners?
Well, I've had the chance to talk with Mr. Gonzalez on this issue, and I think just in the fairness of keeping good rapport with Benton County, that we move forward with it. So.
We have somebody online that is typing while they're on. Could they please silence their speaker? And I'll just concur that I think that we have dug into this as much as we could possibly can. I think that this is a good opportunity for Franklin County to have a means for our juvenile, which we have 5 right now that are in there. For us to give up $7 million for 5 residents at this point in time would be a little bit costly. So I'm very appreciative of the fact that Benton County is allowing us to become subscribers, as you might say, for the people that would be in this service. So if there's no more discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I have comments.
Okay.
I have long advocated for the client-subscriber model, as I have called it for years, wherein one county that perhaps has the capacity that the other doesn't to build these kind of facilities, and then the second county contracts for services on a usage basis. We do it with Human Services. We've done it for years in a cooperative arrangement with our courts. It's the kind of cooperation that I think we not only should do, I think as counties, we have a duty to do this to our citizens, to provide quality facilities and services at the most effective cost. At the same time, we have a parallel duty to our constituents to make sure that the county's interests are properly recognized, documented, and considered in these discussions. And while I'm generally in favor of this particular proposal, my recollection is that the last discussion that we had with staff centered on the question of whether or not we really did have any interest in a parcel of land, and whether or not anyone had looked at the 2 capital contributions that Franklin County had made into the existing facility over the years. I think it would have been part of our due diligence and our responsibilities to our citizens and taxpayers to have gone through and looked at those costs and estimated whether or not there was any residual value to Franklin County that should be considered in this agreement. Now, that work may all have been done, but as one of 3 voting members of this panel, no one's provided that information to me as of today. So my objection is minor. It's predicated on the fact that we have an obligation for due diligence, which I don't think has been met. It may have been met for some people, but the information that was requested has not been provided to all the members of the board. I'm inclined to go ahead and vote and support it today because generally in principle, I think the alternative is less desirable for our citizens. But I do want to note that I don't think that in the realm of completed staff work that we've really met our obligations to our constituents. That's my opinion, and looking forward to the opportunity to vote on it. Thank you.
So any residual interest that we had in the facility is being, my understanding, prorated out for future monthly expenses. Is that correct?
Yeah, there is a funding formula that Dwayne's been talking to them quite a bit about. Dwayne, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we determined what the residual value was, and then they're taking that off of the first several payments to allow us a little bit of time to go into the next budget year.
So, Mr. Davidson, I'd appreciate knowing what you determined was the residual value, because
It wasn't me. It was done upon agreed-upon procedures that the board agreed upon. That included the Benton County Treasurer and the Franklin County Auditor that did basically not an assessment, but did kind of an evaluation, looked at all of the facility and determined what the residual value at this time was, knowing that there has been some pretty large contributions put in by Benton County that we weren't able to participate in, like even the roof, which was, I think I recall, about $400,000. And so it left us was probably a smaller portion than we would have liked to have had, but at the same time, I don't think we really had a ownership interest, at least we were never able to determine that in that, and I think our prosecuting attorney has agreed to that too. That's why they signed off as to form to the, they're not here to attest to that, but it's what I hear that they've done.
so when the prosecuting attorney's office signs as to form, that means nothing more than the required elements of a contractor present. It does not ever speak to content, wisdom, value, anything else. They've made that clear to us many times. I'm pleased to hear that the auditor participated in determining what that residual value is. I'd be grateful if Mr. Beaton, who is here in the room, would share with us what that residual value is, because we are essentially trading, we the taxpayers, that residual value for Benton County agreeing to waive our lease payment for the first 10 months of a 10-year contract. Now, that might be a good exchange. That might be fair and equitable value, but I have no way to know that without knowing what we determined was the residual value in the building. If we determined that the residual value was really nothing, then it's a great deal. But we put in millions over the years into this building. So, Mr. Beaton, if you could educate me on what the group determined was the residual value, I would be most grateful.
Sure, I can tell you that there was no value determined. What I can tell you was that myself and another gentleman, the treasurer, toured the building. You can't. There's two types of value. Either you own something that has ownership, fee simple, or it's operational. And then if you don't own the land and you invest in a building and over time it depreciates, it goes to zero. So in the end, being involved in the process, that building is in terrible state of disrepair. What you were arguing over, quite frankly, was how to keep this relationship going. We essentially, what I could tell, and like I said, we did not perform, you guys did not order an appraisal. That appraisal wouldn't have probably started until somebody produced exactly what was being appraised. Essentially what it was a building walkthrough while we waited to find out if there was fee simple interest or what this bi-county relationship looked like, and then to meet, as you said, our statutory responsibilities vis-a-vis those elements. So, like I said, my involvement had to do with remaining economic life, if there was any, or how they were going to utilize it. It was, quite frankly, what it really came back to is we have not been putting money into it, and we stood there with our hat in our hand is basically what I think. So I'm not sure on the details on that, but if you're curious on a number, there is no number, because as far as nobody could produce what exactly we were valuing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I know that you have a professional appraiser background. I don't know if it includes commercial or not. It's really not the point, because you weren't asked, as you said, to do an appraisal. And you make a good point that given the age of the building and the condition, that the investments made into it by both counties may in fact be fully depreciated. I was simply looking for factual information to base the decision on, as opposed to individual estimates, guesstimates, so forth. But I appreciate the additional insight. Realizing that you didn't do an appraisal, you weren't asked to do an appraisal, and that I'm just asking for your opinion. Is it your opinion that building is fully depreciated, and any useful life value that might have been existing in it is today zero, that the building is essentially valueless?
No.
Okay.
And I think that's what I said and why I think they were willing to do something, because clearly it's not zero if it's currently being used.
Thank
so
you.
it goes without saying that, and that was part of the discussion, was how it's going to be utilized and all of that. In the end, what it really comes down to, as it does with any negotiation, is what is our ability to negotiate. And the fact was, in the discussions, it was agreed that there was some useful life by virtue of the fact that it was in use. Mm-hmm. So, whatever that was is
Right.
actually between you gentlemen and them to find out what's to do. It's on the, for the best of the community, kind of in honor of what's already been done, and hopefully how we move forward. And I look forward to seeing how it comes together.
Yeah.
There's good people on both sides, so it was what it was, and I think we achieved what we could, which is that we got something, but that without fee simple definitive number, I don't know that if I thought I could have come back and said, hey, pay for the appraisal, I would have, but the bottom line was, nobody produced a document that said there was a division of the actual that was substantive, so.
Yeah, okay. Well, I appreciate your input. I think it's valuable. I'll just close with the notion that, Franklin County did put in, I don't recall the exact number. I want to say it was 2-point-something million at one point. It was 1-point-something million at the start, and then we've been paying toward maintenance costs for a number of years, plus we've been paying a percentage based on our percentage of use in the building. So it isn't that we just, wrote a small contribution, 20, 30 years ago, and that's it. We've been ongoing contributors in maintaining and upkeeping and using the building, and had some significant capital investment up front. And all I was looking for was someone to take each of those things and say, that's fully depreciated, or there's a residual value, or our contributions to maintaining the building have contributed to its current value, and therefore there's some credit due there. I just think that I have a duty to look at it at that level of diligence. You're an auditor and appraiser. I'm sure you can appreciate due diligence. So, again, I appreciate your comments. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think it was a thoughtful process, I can tell you that, for what we did, for what everybody did involved, so.
Mr. Davidson.
Matt, can you elaborate a little bit more? I think it's kind of important to the fact about the value of it, that the considerable portion of the building is going to need to be torn down for this remodel, and that factors too. Isn't that correct?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the bottom line is, and the way remaining life works is that it doesn't just go gradually to zero. It goes down to a point, and then it just straight lines down. And the fact that it is still in use means it does have some useful life, but if they're not putting a roof on or doing things that we're not participating in, it does immediately become uninhabitable. So it was, I mean, they have been, through the management and the people involved, they've been doing a good job with what's there, but it's time. And that was my only point with them was, if they had stopped doing their side, and then how you measure that is more of a cash flow business issue than it is it's a going concern as opposed to something tangible, which I'm not sure, that would be a PA question. I literally, yes, there was some
but that
useful
number-
life, but we didn't have a whole lot to argue on.
But that number they gave us was quite large. It was like 75% or something like that of the building is going to be demolished for the remodel.
Right. Well, and that would be, yeah.
And I would
That'd just be prudent that you
I would
would.
just add, if we're going to keep arguing the fact that we have an interest in it, they might ask us to come get our portion of that 75% too.
Well,
Would be very costly to
For my part, it's just boxed up on the building and the discussion around the valuation. So the rest of it's you guys. So, but anyway, did that answer your question? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. If there's no further discussion, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, move to approve Resolution 2023-126 as presented in the matter of the Memorandum of Understanding and Agreement between Benton and Franklin Counties for the allocation of juvenile justice center operations, facilities, construction, usage, cost, and ownership.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2023-126. With no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Next, we'll move down to Commissioner Administrator updates, and we should also put down their consultant. Mr. Davidson, do you have anything to, okay, Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's been another busy week and making a lot of progress. Really excited that we launched our social media platform. So you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Also have a blog that I'll be writing to. It's franklincountywa.org. So I'll be writing articles and really highlighting the good things that are happening. One of the first people that I profiled was our clerk of the court, Michael Killian. So I had a really good opportunity to meet with Michael and had a great conversation. And I'll tell you what, he really runs a tight ship there. And what really impressed me, commissioners, was just the positive energy that I felt in his office. It was great. And, the other thing I noticed is, and Michael was very proud of this, 70% of his employees are Latino or Latina, and that's critical in our community, 55% Latino. And so it was great to just see the staff getting along and really dispelling any notion that, we have morale issues, because, man, it was just wonderful. So really appreciated meeting with Michael. Also had a chance to meet with Judge Trinity Orozco. And really, that's one of the initiatives that I have, is really communicating with our elected officials, building those relationships. You'll see me walking around the courthouse. I really want the folks here to know that I'm engaged and I'm concerned for them. And we're going to continue to move the county forward. Also had a chance to meet with Jay Atwood from the Benton County Emergency Services to get up to speed on that. So really excited about that. Also was part of the Franklin County Pasco Business Advisory Council. The Pasco Business Advisory Council is something that I started when I was the economic development manager out at the city of Pasco. So the intent is to continue that and expand it to North County. So we talked about that a little bit. So again, it's an engagement piece. It's an opportunity to get to know our constituents. So I'm committed to that. Transparency, communication is something that I'm all about. So I'll continue that, and we continue to be busy moving forward.
Thank you. And I will say thank you to your update email every week.
Absolutely.
Very well done. Commissioner Peck.
Let's see, had Benton Franklin Council of Governments board meeting. Turned out to be fairly long. I saw Commissioner Didier visited for a portion of that. We, generally speaking, dealt with bylaws updates, loan program reviews, budgets, finances, sale of surplus property, a couple of other issues. Had an interesting meeting with a constituent on a commemorative aviation event that they're planning that focuses on the early email flights, probably the first commercial airline operation in the United States that happened here in Tri-Cities, coming up on 100 years ago. Hanford Area Economic Investment Trust board meeting yesterday afternoon, and then met with Wasatch staff electronically over the phone on the legislature's sine die or conclusion of the session without dealing with a fix to what is known as the Blake Bill, having to do with drug possession and law enforcement ability to deal with those issues. In short, the current temporary fix expires here, I think, July 1st, and unless the legislature does something, there's really not going to be much in the way of tools for law enforcement to deal with illicit drug use. Some counties are talking about doing things independently and creating their own local ordinances and policies on the matter. I personally favor, at least for the short, near term, a wait and see to find out whether or not Wasatch is able to get a legislative fix. There's no clear picture yet whether or not the legislature is going to do a special session. If they do, that likely would be the purpose for it. But I think, at least for me right now, it's a short-term wait and see. And if the legislature doesn't get something done pretty quickly, then we maybe need to have a conversation about whether or not we should, and if so, what we should do in the terms of a local county ordinance. And I'll just close on that point by saying, imagine if you've got laws that are substantially different on drug possession and use in the 39 counties, that could be a real challenge for law enforcement. I think we need a consistent statewide answer to the problem. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen.
So last week we had the Highway Users Federation weekly legislative briefing. Also had the Benton Franklin Good Roads meeting where we had a presentation by the Washington State Patrol on distracted driving, and then also the update on Railroad Avenue is being repaired for the coming of the Darigold project. Also had the Disability Board meeting last week, and also this morning I met with Tim Anderson in the accounting office in discussion of the overpayment of excess health care benefit contributions. And just want to say that since I've been in office, I've only taken the insurance. And I'm assuming that when we voted in the additional insurance for the employees' portion, that's what created the overage of a payment to myself of $334.40, which I am looking forward to paying back. And so I think the easiest solution is going to be just to have it taken out of my next check so that the appropriate taxes and other withdrawals are all in order, rather than me doing it at the end of the year when I file my income tax. I think this is a lot cleaner process, at least for myself. The others, I think, are not sure what they're going to do as far as addressing that issue. But this all stems from 2016, when I wasn't even in office. And it was voted that excess health care benefit contributions were to go to cash for elected salaries. And so that, like I said, was voted in 2016 after the election. And I think if you want to get some better understanding and situations that happened in 2016, you can request from IT the recordings of the meetings. On November 2nd, a special session was called for an early meeting on Election Day because the commissioners used to meet on Wednesdays. And something came up that said that had to be urgently addressed before the end of the year, with the comment of, well, I guess it has to be addressed before Election Day. And at that point, I knew exactly what was happening, and I turned to Sheriff Raymond and I said, the commissioners are going to give themselves a raise on Election Day. And that's exactly what happened after the majority of votes were in. And that, to me, it might be legal, but is very questionable as being ethical. If the commissioners are going to give themselves a raise, in my opinion, it should be done before a filing period. In filing period, your filing fee is established off of your salary. It kind of hit me personally pretty hard because of the fact that I ran for this office that year in 2016. I lost by 13 votes, which if 7 people would have known that the commissioners were raising their salary on Election Day, I think those 7 votes would have been easily made up, and I would have won by 1 vote. That's how important every vote is. So what the commission did was they held the meeting early on Tuesday with the announcement that they were not going to adjourn, but they were going to hold the meeting a day early on Tuesday, Election Day, because the commission met on Wednesdays at that point, and they said they were going to recess after the decisions being made, and then they would adjourn the following day on their regular scheduled commission. And that's when they gave themselves a raise, because it had to be addressed before the election was over. So then 2 weeks later, they passed this motion to convert excess health care into cash. And that's how 6 years later, it has affected myself, who has never taken cash in lieu of insurance. So if you want some good reading, I would contact IT and just request the meetings on November 2nd and November 8th and November 9th, because the commissioner meeting was extended over 2 days so that they could recess after giving themselves a raise and then adjourn on the following day, which is something right out of the Dukes of Hazzard and Boss Hogg, if you ask me. It's just so unethical. Thank you.
All right. My last week was the budget meeting here in the same room, Hanford Communities meeting, Columbia Basin Sustainable Water Coalition, Franklin County, I have it down as Franklin County. I can't remember what that was, but the agenda meeting was on Friday. And I too want to address this because I too have taken the insurance and have got caught up in this because of the increase, and then our insurance wasn't costing that much. So I owe money back, and I want to address it as soon as possible too. But I think as a board, we need to stop the bleeding here, and we got to revert the VEBA to cash, the last one that was passed. We need to probably stop that so that it doesn't keep adding up on other people, and then we got to figure out a way to recover the unconstitutional compensation, and we need the PA, the prosecuting attorney, to research the legal options for recovery. Those are the 3 steps we need to be looking at in resolving this situation. So with that, we'll move down to
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner
Since
Peck.
you two have spoken to the issue at length, I'll add some comments of my own here, since apparently we're doing updates on a variety of issues. The compensation, as some people are calling it, for people who aren't taking health benefits has three options. One, it can be into somebody's VEBA account, health savings account, and it's tax-free. Second option is people can buy the insurance, and whatever authorized monthly benefit amount is in excess of their insurance payment can also go into VEBA. There's also a legal option for individuals to receive that as cash in lieu of VEBA. Now, there are reasons for each of those three options that are not immediately apparent. I'll speak to one because it touches on my own situation, and that is there are some people who have pre-purchased over the years lifetime medical care. In my case, it was through decades of military service on active duty where I worked for lower pay on a promise that when I retired I'd have lifetime medical. I don't need to buy the county's medical. I don't need two medical policies. Thankfully, my military coverage is as good or better than what the county sells. Taking those funds into VEBA or taking them as taxable fringe benefit doesn't cost the taxpayers or the county 1 penny difference. But it is important for some people who don't want to have it tax-free in VEBA, because some of us believe that the federal government is working to make VEBA a first payer account where your VEBA funds will be required to be expended before certain other benefits kick in, Medicaid, Medicare, and others. And that's a real risk for some people to have a lot of funds tied up there and have that go to a first payer. Some policies require people to use those VEBA accounts first. For some of us, it makes more sense to take it as a taxable fringe benefit. I don't believe that people should be penalized for having pre-purchased insurance through military service. I don't think people should be penalized because their spouse is paying for a policy somewhere else. That's still a cost to them. I do believe that all employees are entitled to equal benefit compensation regardless of the manner in which they take that compensation. It should be noted that these decisions about taking it as VEBA contribution tax-free or taking it as taxable fringe benefit have to be done on a group basis, either a union bargaining group or, in our case, all of the electeds that act as a group. And the electeds in 2016 voted unanimously to take it as a taxable fringe benefit. I believe the real issue here is that language used, and I haven't had time to go back and review all of the details, and I agree that the PA's office probably should do that anyway. But the simple distinction between whether it's taxable additional salary or whether it's a taxable fringe benefit, I believe is going to come down to the IRS ruling that the auditor's office did years ago, and they made very clear that these were just like vehicle reimbursements and other contributions for the county are federally taxable fringe benefits, not salary. But again, I'll defer to the PA's office to do that research and look forward to seeing what it says. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to direct the auditor's office to revert VEBA to cash contributions for county commissioners to amounts approved with Resolution 2016-426.
I'll second. There's been a motion and a second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I think on an issue of this magnitude, it's out of order to make such a motion, especially pending the request for a legal review. It's certainly premature, and it seems at least like the reasonable, ethical thing to do to hear from legal counsel as to what the legal realities are of what transpired in 2016 and where we are today. And if we want to do this, then we can do it. But the motion has a number of other issues as well that I'm not going to speak to right now. But if passed, will become a challenge for the county.
I just might add that in the pamphlet of papers here that we got from the auditor, MRSC has said that these health care benefits are a stipend, could be given to an elected official instead of health insurance, but a stipend would be treated as extra compensation. Given the constitutional prohibition against additional compensation during a term of office, see Article 11, Section 8, the stipend could not be given or accepted until the officer starts or is reelected to a new term. So I think this has merit, and I think we need to stop it immediately, and therefore,
And I would note, Mr. Chairman, that MRSC is not our legal counsel. In fact, in every conversation with MRSC, they're obliged, and they do, point out, do not follow our legal counsel. Your prosecuting attorney's office is your legal counsel. They are a not-for-profit, state-funded group of attorneys who issue their own opinions on matters, but they're not our legal counsel. And I think this deserves to go through legal review. And if you want to get an independent outside attorney hired through the prosecutor's office, that's at the prosecutor's discretion, but I'm fine with that as well. But this is an issue that we certainly should be discussing, but to come in and motion for such a substantial change without any advance notice, without anything on the agenda, and realizing that this affects every employee in the county, not just the electeds, it's certainly premature and certainly can wait a week or whatever it takes for the prosecutor's office to give us a county legal opinion, not operating off of a nonprofit group of attorneys who make very clear that they do not give us legal advice.
so my question then is to, I guess, Tim, would this affect everyone that is getting this compensation or just the one commissioner who voted for it?
I mean, I think some of those could be getting into the realm of legal opinions, which I don't think I can do. But ultimately, I mean, I think if you were going to make a motion, you'd want to make it clear that it was only in relation to the commissioners and not anyone else. But I don't know how or if it can be structured like that, because I'd have to look back at the original resolution as well from 2016 to. I think it was more than just the elected officials on that, but I could be wrong. I don't remember. Dwayne, do you recall if that was only on the elected officials?
I don't recall.
Or
Yeah, because it won't affect everybody in the courthouse. It only affects the people that voted on it. Because that's all this pertains to, is you're voting yourself a pay increase.
Correct.
And that's illegal.
correct.
I would like to get it stopped. Like I said, I've only taken the insurance, and so for this to continue on and happen again, I'd just soon stop it.
As I've only taken the insurance. Absolutely.
One, I don't believe there's been any request to my office to do a formal review of this. I
made it last week.
I'm sorry?
I made it last week during the
You
meeting.
sent the documentation and information for review last week?
I made the statement in here that I wanted you to look into this.
That's not how we do legal requests. I don't believe I was even in the meeting
Okay,
at the
Sean,
time.
we'll follow the letter of the law then. I'll send you a document right after this meeting.
Alls I'm saying is, alls we need is a communication to the office. Alls we need is a request, because apparently documentation that this board has made reference to has not been submitted to my office for review.
I asked it to be submitted. It wasn't submitted, huh? I asked for that to be sent up to your office. You never received nothing. Okay. We'll get it sent to your office.
So
Sean.
two things, I guess, of concern of just what has been provided here. If Commissioner Mullen and yourself have not opted out, you were not participants or recipients of the raise, I don't understand how you would be obligated to repay anything.
Because when the rates were raised by us, our insurance didn't cost that much, And so we got compensated for the difference in the money for 1 month, and that's what we're paying back. It went into
hold
our
on.
salary.
But I don't believe you were in office in 2016, right?
No, this was 2022. This was last year when we voted to raise up all of the health insurance to
Okay.
$16.90.
So all of the discussion has been discussing around this 2016 move. I believe that's what you had brought up before, that, hey, these increases or changes allowing individuals as groups could receive compensation for their health insurance benefits, either through a taxable fringe benefit, through the health insurance that's offered through the county, or contributions into their VIBA account.
It was voted on by the commissioners.
In
And it
2016.
included the commissioners, which was voting
Right.
themselves a pay raise.
So in 2016.
Exactly.
And so, but now you're talking about a portion that apparently
That's all we're talking about
relates-
is stopping the portion
Okay.
that was added in 2022. We can't do anything with 2016
But
right now.
again, that's the real question here, is because if it should have been coded as a taxable fringe benefit, I think there's a lot of conclusions that have been made without doing a thorough analysis. If this is simply needed to be as a taxable fringe benefit, then that's something that should have been coded correctly, and you'd pay that portion of taxes.
That's all fine and dandy with everybody in the courthouse.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the people that voted themselves a pay increase, the commissioners. That's all it's pertaining to.
Well, again, if you don't think this warrants legal review, I'm hearing that last week you apparently requested it. I haven't received it, and so I just wanted to make sure that if we did get that request, I haven't seen that request yet, and I don't know if Mike or Dwayne could address that, because usually we'll get a request coming from the county administrator saying the board is requesting additional information on this or seeking a legal opinion. Because what usually comes with that, we have an application form to help the workflow into our office where it will address, hey, this is the legal issue that we have a question on, here's the supporting documentation, we want this to be reviewed. Apparently, there was documentation provided to the board. I haven't seen that, and so I can't give the board a legal opinion on something that I haven't received.
And I have to do it in
No, alls we need
I
is.
can request it right now?
Well, alls we
Can I
need-
request it right now from
alls
you,
I-
Sean? Is this good enough to request it right now in front of an audience?
So the question is what documents do you want reviewed? What is the particular issues? If you could just articulate that, send it to our office, and we could route it and get you looking into it.
Have you seen this package?
I haven't. That's the whole point.
We'll
I
get
haven't
a
seen
copy of it for you,
anything.
because it's got it all in
Okay.
there.
All right, great.
I'm surprised you know nothing about this.
I wasn't in the meeting. If you didn't know, we have several homicide cases that I'm trying to attend to upstairs. When we moved the commissioner meetings from Wednesday to Tuesday, that was one of the issues I raised. I have a lot of hats I have to wear, and I have to be in a lot of places at a lot of times.
Okay.
Sorry if you didn't realize we do have criminal dockets every Tuesday, and I'm trying to keep up the best I can.
Hopefully you're staying safe out there with that car and that light.
Well, we actually haven't got that yet because there's a problem when that was
Okay.
transferred to the fleet. It wasn't
So
properly.
I will
vetted.
make sure you get a copy of this, and
Okay.
I'm asking for a full review.
Okay,
Thank you.
you bet.
So with that, I don't know if I would pass this without clarity of who this affects, because I don't want it to stop for the other employees. Do you believe, Mr. Davison, this will stop the payment to the other? How would that motion affect the courthouse?
That's a legal opinion. I think the motion that he said did say county commissioners, but it'd probably be best just to poll this, in my opinion. If you ask
So
my
next week?
opinion,
Yes.
that's my opinion, is not to do this motion.
Today? Okay.
And send up to like the prosecutor said, send it up to his review, and we can get him a copy of the document. It was also suggested in this discussion that took place that there is the opportunity to be asking for this to actually go to outside counsel.
Yes,
For some independence, and that might be something you guys want to request too.
exactly. I do want to request that. So, Mr. Mullen, will you pull your motion?
I will pull the motion.
Okay. The motion has been pulled. So with that, elected department head business, anybody in the courthouse?
Commissioners, a couple things. In 2016, when they voted where the excess of your insurance was going to go to, I didn't vote for it to go to taxes. I wanted it to go to my VEBA account, and I still have a VEBA account that I carry in my back pocket all the time, with substantial money in there. What I was told was, if you're not going to take the insurance, then we have to put it into your wages and tax you. So since 2000, I think it's 19, when my wife started, provided me medical coverage, which is much better than your all's, just so you know. I've been being taxed, and I've provided the federal forms and everything else showing that's my benefits, not the county's or any of those type of things. And I'm simply following federal and state law, how I use my benefits. Secondly, you spoke briefly about the Blake decision. Just so you know, we are in the sheriff's office beginning to look at writing ordinances to counteract the problems that are taking place. If the governor calls them back into session and they solve it, then might work. I don't see that happening, but we are going to explore in partnership with the city of Pasco what an ordinance would look like that can be used both in municipal court and district court to try to address the problems, because the deputies are encountering the same things: people shooting up, using hard drugs, people dying, et cetera, et cetera. So somewhere we have to address that problem as a community, and it just might be that it's an ordinance in order to do that.
So Sheriff, along those lines, I think I remember you telling me once that one of your deputies, seen somebody in a vehicle shooting up and then took off driving, and you can't even pursue them.
No, happens monthly nowadays.
And that's a hazard to our constituents on the roads.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to add that, the whole converting the cash to earning the overpayment of insurance to cash only affects the county commissioners because of the fact that they voted and it raised their own salaries. It has nothing to do with the other electeds in their VEB at this point.
Right. I understand that.
Okay.
I just want, because you keep using elected. I happen to be elected.
Right, no, it's only county
But you
commissioners.
didn't
I happen
get to
to have
vote
a
on it.
VEBA account, and I happen to pay taxes on the insurance.
Sure,
So I
no.
wanted that to be.
No, thank you for that clarification.
But the difference is you didn't get to vote on it, Sheriff.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not.
All right, thank
I'm not
you.
arguing that.
Thank you.
None of the other electeds got to vote on any of it. Commissioners, substitute House Bill 1355 did pass. The governor did sign it. There will be substantial demands upon the assessor's office come next year for increases in eligible seniors with low enough incomes, veterans, disabled veterans, and disabled individuals. So that, the governor did sign that. That is going into effect. We will have the median household income numbers supposedly next month from the Office of Financial Management. Preliminary numbers show that Franklin County has moved into number 4 spot in the entire state. So as I mentioned, that will easily qualify seniors up into and disabled veterans, disabled individuals up into the neighborhood of somewhere around 55+ thousand a year income on that. The Department of Revenue is going to be putting out policies, guidelines, procedures, which we haven't seen yet. They've got till August to pretty much get that done. But I did want to bring you up to speed. The governor did sign it, so that is now going into effect.
Thank you.
Mr. Rose, now I just note that that decision about how to receive health benefits and the options was discussed by all the electeds in place at the time in this room, and it was voted on by all the electeds. My recollection was that it was unanimous, but I may be mistaken. There may have been one or two that voted no. But it was the electeds that decided as a group to do it, as would be required if a union bargaining group wanted to do it.
Yeah, and I have
Want
no
to clarify.
problem with
You
how
weren't-
they chose to do it.
you
I
weren't
just,
here, yeah.
I'm paying federal tax on it, so I get what their vote was. So,
Sure.
and I don't think we were offered VIBA. If you had some other source, at least I wasn't.
Yeah,
It
the-
was
the
one
discussion-
option or the other, and I'm old enough that I'm covered under Medicare and have been for quite a few years. So, and I pay for supplemental out of my own pocket on top of that, and any deductions. So, I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you.
Well, it was my discussion with Mr. Anderson that it would be easier to pull that $341 out of my next check so that, because I have paid taxes on it. And
Well,
so-
Commissioner, I truly believe that paying that back is the right thing to do. I think it's morally and ethically correct. I had the auditor's office just send me a letter here a week and a half or 2 weeks ago on an expense that we did out of our office that they reviewed and thought, well, maybe it wasn't quite as kosher as we originally had thought it was. I just walked up, wrote them a check, and handed them the money. So anything that's questionable, I believe in being above and open. It had to do with some training that I sent my employees to that they didn't feel met quite the criteria for the accredited or certified training, and it had to do with team building stuff. And so I just wrote them a check and paid for it out of my own pocket. And I think that's the right thing to do is, do the moral and ethical thing. So,
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll just follow that comment by noting that the moral and ethical thing, from my perspective, is that we don't treat our employees, be they elected or employees, differently based on their personal circumstance. Whether they have insurance, whether they want it to go to VIBA, whether they want it as a taxable fringe benefit, we ought not be picking winners and losers and compensating some employees and not others just predicated on whether or not they choose to take our insurance. They may have a spouse that provides it, they may not have the need for it, any number of scenarios. But what you will find is that if you drive it this direction, everyone will probably take the insurance, and the cost of the county is likely not to be different. And I expect, but I don't know at this point, but I anticipate that legal action would ensue on the basis of discrimination. Thanks.
I think this is something for further discussion because,
I do too.
the other side of the coin is if everybody did take the insurance, then there would be people that working in this courthouse would have better benefits for their kids.
Yep.
And be buying a lot more insurance than they desire. And that puts us in a position of dictating what people purchase and don't, which I didn't think was our role.
I see we have the treasurer at the mic.
So Josie Kilzer, and I was in that meeting when they decided to have that discussion about having the insurance or taking it as a cash. And there was a few of us that chose not to vote for it, and I was one of them because I did take the insurance. And because of it, I do now pay, I do not have a VIBA, and I do pay the extra in taxes. So I was one that did not ask to be paid out in a cash value.
Thank you.
I'm not sure that I was clear last week, but to anybody either listening or interested in this, the actual information that the auditor's office compiled, anybody that wants to read the rationale and the data that the board will be considering over the weeks ahead, it is available on the Franklin County Auditor's website under the auditor's blog. You'll find the scanned-in summary as well as everything that they're looking at from a public standpoint. There was some public interest in people knowing exactly what you're looking at and what the issues are that will need to be determined. And so, as well as the legal review from MRSC, several AGO opinions, it'll all be there. And in fact, if, whether you send it up, it's obviously a good idea to send it up formally to the PA, but it's available. So I just wasn't sure I was clear on that last week. As this unfolds, everybody's going to wonder what exactly the issue is we're wrestling with. And it was literally just the commissioners, it was just the timing, and it was the aspect that it's being taken as salary. So those were the key things, but the public can look online at that packet and bring their concerns to you guys.
Thank you.
Curtis McGarry Corner. You know, as of just this year, I get a little bit of kickback because I'm like you guys. My insurance, the deductible I chose doesn't take as much as what the allowance is, and so I get a little kickback. Obviously, I wasn't here in 2016, but a couple of things I've thought about when the auditor presented this last week was, one, this was 7 years ago. Why has it taken 7 years for the auditor to look at this? Where was he 7 years ago? Why wasn't that brought up 7 years ago? I just kind of wonder, why now? I mean, I'm glad it's being caught and discovered and corrected, but why has it taken 7 years? The second thing is we have legal counsel in-house, and I hope that before we send it out to a private company, which will cost us money, and that's our issue here is money, is let's look at what legal counsel in-house has to say, please. Thank you.
It'd be easier if you'd come talk to me, Mr. McGarry, but I can tell you, I explained it last week, and if you go back and look at it, there was no reason other than the MRSC insights for this review to take place. So contrary to popular belief that is perpetuated over and over, the auditor's function here is to implement the rules, policies, and procedures. I don't know that anybody internally, other than processing their AP requests, have seen us look at anything other than what comes before us. It drops in our lap. If somebody internally, there's a whistleblower, we've got some of that going on right now. In fact, we do have a whistleblower hotline. We will look at these things. This particular situation came about because MRSC, a policy and legal advice, but it's very high level across the state, very reputable, sends out information that if it's applicable, we grab it. And I'm assuming cities and counties across the state do this to find out how our policies compare. So there is, the fact that this was passed on the 21st of November, and it turned out in retrospect when we look back to see how it applied to us, because this is uncommon to turn this into salary. Not a lot of people, not a lot of entities do this, although it's becoming more popular. And if you look at the AGO opinions, school districts do this, and other elected boards have different capacities to do this. But this isn't something where the board asked me to look at it. At that time, what my opinion was, it was routed through the then county administrator and HR, and there was no reason to believe that this, again, loss, it's not fraud, it's a loss. And it is unconstitutional, which makes it perpetual. The same thing occurred with a retroactive, the timing of, or the way that in our past, the way that a COLA was processed. And literally the management letter said it should have been paid prospectively instead of retroactively. So again, I mean, we're getting into the weeds because a lot of us have been here and some people have, but it's important that electeds, the public understand exactly how this works. There isn't, we will look back at anything that's appropriate and it'll come up if it's still relevant. But there is plenty of things that unless they come to us, I mean, if somebody came and made a complaint against the coroner and asked us to look into his practices, well, we would do whatever is confined, within our authority to do that. But if it doesn't come to us, I have no reason to believe that this loss had occurred. So it's important that the public understand that.
I got a question for you. In here, you made this statement. It should be noted that all three resolutions were written and submitted by the former HR director and the former county administrator without a review by the prosecuting civil department. And for the right mind of me, I can't believe that legal didn't review this.
Well, I can't comment. I gave that so that people would understand that the legal review provided by MRSC was, you know, which is, like it said, it's 80 years old, it's independent,
Yep.
it doesn't have any
Yep.
relationships in here. So that was what triggered it all, and it's, if you look at the packet online, it's pretty cut and dried.
Okay,
And
so as chairman, I'm going to ask our administrator to please make sure every resolution is reviewed by legal before we vote on it. That needs to be
Absolutely.
done. Every resolution.
That is a fantastic, I mean, that has not been a past practice, and that may well have some of the problems. And, you know, as we mature, as we grow as a county, I mean, some of those problems that occurred with the elected officials from that 2018 COLA and the two different resolutions, there was a lot of issues that hopefully, you know, we can equip the PA to do what needs to be done as far as the timing and all those things on the ones that have this important legal impact, because this is a loss that we have to deal with, and you know, it just is what it is. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there any other department heads?
Yeah, I'd like to just take an opportunity to address that. As the commission may recall, last year, we tried to propose some additional changes in my office, including additional staffing, because this issue has been brought up quite a bit. There's been talk about, hey, let's send things to legal. Still, that hasn't changed the policy. We address the need for increasing our resources in our office, because that's going to be a significant change. The number of resolutions that come to this board on a regular basis, some might be relatively simple, others might require a lot more time and complexity to get a good analysis. As I think everybody understands, if you want a good product, we have to have sufficient resources and sufficient time. Oftentimes we are asked, sometimes even the day before a meeting, where something that wasn't even brought to our office's attention, and expecting a thorough analysis and legal review. It takes time. I don't do legal advice by shooting off the cuff. I think we've made record of that. We want to make it clear that decisions are made by the board that has the best opportunity for us to do a legal analysis, give you the information, and let the board decide. If we don't have adequate resources and timing to provide that analysis to the board, then that means the board is not going to have the opportunity to make the best decisions. So I certainly would welcome that. I know we've requested in the past additional resources. Right now, we've had some change with people leaving, including loss of our longtime serving chief civil deputy, and so that's a huge loss. So we're making transitions right now to be able to accommodate that. So if the board wishes to do that, we're going to need additional resources. And as the Office of Public Defense has come to you and shared their concerns with trying to fill staffing. Prosecutors throughout the state are having a challenge in filling these positions for a variety of reasons. Frankly, compensation is one of them. And so it's not just Franklin County. This is going on throughout the state of Washington, and in fact in other states as well, where trying to get people that are willing to come and serve in public service as attorneys, it's a challenge. So even if the board were to authorize it, it would be a while before we could get those additional resources. I'm going to be down 4 deputies by the middle of next month. Due to people leaving and transferring. That's a huge number, because we've pulled a person that was in a senior DPA status to take over as civil chief. That's going to be a while to be able to get up to the speed, getting involved in taking on everything from risk management to all the other civil issues that come to our office on a regular basis, issues involving employment, as well as all the other claims and everything else that we have on a regular basis. So anyway, I just wanted the board to be aware of that we're already down 4 positions. And if the expectation is now to route everything else, we're going to need to fill with probably another hybrid position where a civil deputy will also take on additional work, not just strictly that. I've been a good manager of utilizing resources, and we've created hybrid positions in my office when that was not done previously. If people are not given enough work, we join their caseload, either putting a combination of civil work with their caseload, combining their felony caseload with other departments that traditionally were not included in one position. I think we've done a great job doing that. Now the ultimate issue is we have a continuing issue, as you heard from the sheriff before. criminal activity continues. We continue to have problems. Whether we have laws against drugs doesn't mean we don't have less criminal activity. We have less lawful on the books documented crimes that can be prosecuted, but that bleeds into other areas. It causes other problems, burglaries, other theft crime, other violent crimes. We're dealing with that upstairs. We have several pending homicide cases. We're approximately around 12 right now. And so we continue to do this with the minimal resources that we have. So I just want the board to understand we are doing everything that we can. I'm trying to be in two different places at once because of the needs of this board, the needs of my criminal deputies to have some supervision, managing a caseload of about 400 current felony cases set for trial. That's not an easy caseload. Each one of my deputies is hardworking. They've picked up a lot more cases over the last few years, and we haven't increased resources despite our attempts to improve that opportunity within our office. But like I said, funding is not the only issue. Even authorization for a different deputy, we are struggling trying to fill 4 current vacancies, let alone trying to add an additional one. So I just share that with the board because this is an opportunity time to hear status from each legal department or each of our departments. The legal department, for the first time, have we ever had this kind of a vacancy? And it hit us kind of just at once. One we knew about 8 months ago, and we've been trying to put the motion in place, but she hadn't left yet, and so we can't fill that. So we're looking at other opportunities, trying to figure out how we could to meet the needs of the prosecutor's office for these various areas. And we certainly want to give the legal advice, because I've always said to the board, I agree with the idea of sending resolutions to our office. I think that's how we get the best decisions from this board, is by having full information ahead of time. Coordination with our office is critical. I think, Mike, you've come in from a communications background, and I welcome that. I think that communication and improving departmental communication is helpful. Coming to our office in advance so that we have an opportunity to do the legal work rather than having one department feel that they have to do everything on their own for a couple months and then drop it, and then all of a sudden there's an expectation that we could do a quick review in a few days when other departments have looked at this for a while. So anyway, I'm just sharing that situation with the board. It's a significant issue. The Office of Public Defense is facing the same criteria. I get calls, communication from judges as well, trying to figure out what we can do within our department to try to ease that, whether it's utilizing our district court for more cases. We are really tapped out because we've had to do that over the years. We've had to become smart. We've had to figure out how to triage. How do we tap into therapeutic courts, our felony diversion program, felony mental health court, felony mental health diversion, which is operated through Lords. We have basically tapped out all of these resources already, and we just simply don't have the resources to continue with the additional workloads that are coming. So anyway, just wanted to share that update with the board.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'd just like to say thank you for all the hardworking men and women in your office. Do you feel you're facing any other situations that the rest of the counties throughout the state are facing? I think that lack of trying to find people to work, is not only in your office, but also in the hospitals, mental health, the sheriff's department, any activity out there as far as business-wise attracting new employees is, I've never seen a situation like this in my lifetime, where if you've got the qualifications, you can pretty much write your job wherever you want to go. So have you reached out to other counties to see if they've come up with an idea how to recruit more people? Because I'm assuming they're in the same situation you are.
Yeah, daily basis. Talked to Mr. Eisinger, the new incoming prosecutor of Benton County. They have openings. Yakima County openings. Some of the smaller counties don't, but I know when I talked to Gabe Acosta, the new elected prosecutor in Walla Walla County, he was down like 3 DPA positions as well. And likewise, his office is a little bit smaller than mine, but when you're talking 3 or 4 in our size of office, that's relatively significant. That's about 38% loss of workforce, especially if that's 4 positions from the criminal side, one of them being created, one of those departures being created because of the loss or transition of a senior DPA who is one of the senior level prosecutors on criminal matters, having that individual now try to do both, wrap up a criminal caseload, take on the civil chief position while still prosecuting those cases, wearing that kind of dual hat situation. That's why he's not able to be in here today. He's trying to deal with the criminal caseload that he has right now. But yeah, we're all struggling the same way. I've talked with like Kittitas County prosecutor. They have actually paid and hired a firm. I think it was Peckham and McKinney, one of the other typical firms that are used for trying to hire and recruit for counties in our area. And in fact, Yakima County was offering a $12,000 hiring bonus for deputy prosecutors. They're still struggling trying to get one of them.
Well, I do appreciate all the hard work that comes out of your office, and
Thank you.
I wish you all the luck in trying to recruit new people. So
Yeah, this is definitely, it's a new experience for most of us, and this has probably occurred over the last probably 4 to 6 years, slowly, but now it's kind of hitting critical mass, so to speak, because when I was hired, I mean, it was hard. If you applied to a prosecutor's office, you typically had to apply to probably 4 or 5 offices if you wanted even a chance for an interview, because the demand, for every position open, there's probably 25 to 30 applicants.
not the case
Not the
anymore.
case now. We're trying to even go to, I've gone to the law schools, talked with Gonzaga Law with their office on recruiting. My alma mater, University of Idaho, trying to reach out to them and make it known that, hey, even if you have people that are in their second year, come to our office as a paid intern type position, so hopefully they could get a feel for our community, feel for the work, have a desire to return to public service. Even if they don't return to ours, if they have a desire to be in public service, that helps everybody collectively, and it gets more of a draw for interest. And so we are starting to see a little bit of that, but again, this is causing another problem that we're probably be coming to the board for, is because we are now getting more of the entry-level applicants, and so we're going to have to change some of the structure within our office for additional supervision, because now if we have lower skilled attorneys that are starting out, which is traditionally what would happen, you start out in district court, you gain the experience there, and then you work up into felonies after about 3 to 5 years. Right now, we're having to take people right out of law school and kind of give them a crash course boot camp into even the felony experience.
All right. Well, thank you for your efforts. I appreciate
Glad to
it.
share that, and thank you for inquiring. Thanks for the recognition of the staff that we do have in the office that continue to serve. Thank you.
Is there any other elected or department heads that would like to speak?
Just briefly, Commissioners, I just want to share my appreciation to the board's support for the juvenile justice remodel project moving forward. And I know my presiding judge, Judge Stam, would like to be here as well, but couldn't be due to some other work requirements today. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no other department heads or elected officials, we'll move down to administration office business. Mr. Gonzalez.
Right now, I do not have any, so.
Fantastic. We're down to public comment. Anybody for public comment?
Michelle Andrews, Civil Service Chair Commissioner. This is not coming to you as a complaint, but to keep you informed of all these changes and how they affect the Civil Service Commission. We've moved forward in getting the position advertised, but our current civil attorney is leaving May 19th. Conversations are bifurcated between different people, and Mike's doing the best job he can. It's not a criticism on him at all. In fact, it's applauding his effort. But it still is affecting this commission very deeply. We're just really kind of on the edge. When you have $10,000 signing bonuses in Spokane County Sheriff's Department, it's pretty hard to compete with that. And for months, I've had to keep putting back a proposal that has been proposed before, that we have access through our public safety testing agreement for a 30-second video, and if the people watch it, they can ask us to pay the $11 to add them on. Now, I am not getting enough names from posting the positions alone. And so this is already part of our agreement. I'm hoping that we can get to that because I want to support the Sheriff's Office the best we can, and that's one of the options that we have to find funding for. If we do not find a very experienced Chief Examiner Secretary, and as if you heard from everyone, it's a very difficult position to serve and do, then you're going to have to spend about $10,000 to $15,000 extra to have further support from public safety training. That's what Walla Walla is doing in their standalone. And I've been trying to have these meetings to make sure you have all the information so that you can properly make the decisions to support this department. Again, it's not a complaint, but we are being pushed back over and over with different stuff that we've already proposed. I've got clips of documents put together. I might as well sign on and be a part of the staff at this point. It is not our job to train that person, but I'm doing everything I can to extend care. And so I have a meeting this afternoon with Margot, your interim HR director, and I think Jennifer's going to be a part of that, Jennifer Mendelez, but is bifurcating conversations that I've had with Mike and Jeff now to go try to tackle the rest of it with Jennifer, who's not been a part of all those conversations. It's difficult. So please take time, please listen. There's just a multitude of issues, and I won't go further than that. I won't be here for a couple of weeks, so I don't know what's going to happen, but I'll be ready for my next meeting, I hope, on the 9th of May.
Anybody else for public comment? I believe we have one caller.
Caller, you have 3 minutes.
This study found that around 28% of male police violence from their spouses. While it is true the majority of law enforcement agencies have a corruption problem, the percentage of law enforcement officers that are bad apples, I have a video about that on my YouTube channel, they're less than 1%. So which occupation has the highest rate of domestic violence? That would be police officers. Studies have found that a minimum of 40% of families of officers have experienced some type of domestic violence. That includes anything from harassment, stalking, to homicide. We all understand that a police officer will lock you in a room and get his way with you if he doesn't get what he wants. But not all of them, just maybe 1%. Maybe it's a little worse in Franklin County. We hear from a couple people to about 2%. First of all, I try and get, so I get this right. I would like to preference my comment by saying, Mr. Gonzalez, I preference my comment by stating that I hoped it wasn't true. I feared for my life in August of 2019 when I reported crimes from the Pasco police and retaliation from the Pasco police and deleting evidence from the Pasco police against my family to the sheriff's office. I had no knowledge of the sheriff's previous employment at the Pasco Police Department, or I would have gone to the state police, even though the sheriff's officer was the highest position and the state police told me to go to the sheriff's office. So again, Mike, Mr. Gonzalez from Pasco, actually I referred to the unorthodox manner in which he was hired, and that he happens to come from right next door, Pasco, that's all. I lead everyone else to make their own inferences and discover their own truths. While Mr. Gonzalez, I also set forth for you the high standard and the high bar of transparency and accountability in the community. And I hope you plan to bring your community together and not force people into compliance. I will reserve the rest of my comments for the time I know there is a live video stream and a record of this, for fear of misstatement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Anybody else for public comment? Seeing nobody coming forward, we will move on down to the Franklin County Budget Review presented by Mr. Anderson.
Is this going to be able to work?
Can't show it up on the, it's not working? Tim, we don't, do you have he can plug that in and make it work? Well, you can go through the numbers. This is a new addition.
To next week.
We could do that.
Because this is a display of a lot of numbers, and it's
Yes.
really hard to grasp, would this be okay to post?
Can we try to have
Yeah, I think we could go for
Yeah,
a 5-minute
absolutely.
recess. Okay, we'll recess here at 11 o'clock, be back at 11:05.
I didn't have it. I wasn't sure, but we could call. We can call. For
Unless there's something going to change between now and next week.
So seeing the problems that we're having today, we're still not up and live? We're streaming? Okay, we are back in session, reconvening the meeting at 11:09. But we still have technical issues with the screen. We can't get this up, so we will postpone the budget review presented by Tim Anderson until next week.
Mr. Chairman, I noticed Adam File came in with a folder. I'm guessing that might be item D, Delta, on our regular business agenda, if we wanted to revisit that.
Adam wouldn't be able to attend today, is what I heard.
He just walked in and walked out.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, I think his participation was to deliver the signed documents from Benton County, which I'm guessing is what is in that envelope.
Is he out there, Josie?
Yeah, these are the documents from Benton County.
And this is item D, which is a resolution, and I would still like to request a presentation. And I went and, I was in on the last meeting. I sat in regards to Cubby's Electric and Knight's fabrication. And to be honest with you, I was a little upset with the way they were treated, being that they brought this building back from a $150,000 deficit to a $90,000 plus. It was offered up and was auctioned off at one time, and one buyer, there was Knights, but through the COVID, they lost a lot of money, and they could not make the payments, so they were going to auction the building off again, and honestly, it was almost a forceful acceleration of the bid by Cubbies, or else it was going to go back up for auction, and they felt compelled to raise their bid, and they accepted it. But the building's a 1955-year-old building,
Welcome.
and
To
the
join the conference now,
electrical
please enter the
and
meeting
the
number,
water
followed by
are
pound.
both inadequate. There's going to have to be a lot of money put into that before they can get the okay
Please
to.
enter the attendee access code.
And I just think
followed
that they
by
could have been
pound.
treated better. Plus, we don't have representation from Clotis
meeting
and
access
MISA.
code
We,
you entered is
that Council of
invalid.
Governments, the
Please
Ben
re-enter
Franklin
the
Council of
meeting
Governments, we
access
don't
code.
have anybody representing Clotis, nobody representing MISA, and they are both in our county, and I feel like that we're not being represented well.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to speak to those comments
Please,
as the chairman of the
Commissioner
Benton Franklin Council of Governments. First off, MISA and Clotis are both members, have been for years. The fact that those cities choose not to send a representative is not something we can compel them to do. But they have been members for years. We would love to have them participate, show up, and vote. With respect to the matter of the personal finances of the individuals who were seeking to purchase surplus property from the Council of Governments, I would ask that everybody keep in mind that that is personal, private business information of a borrower from a public entity. And just in a high-level
The
sense
meeting
to
access
protect their
code you entered
privacy,
is in.
I'll just point out that the Council of Governments has a duty as a public entity to ensure that they recover fair market value from surplus properties. We can't simply sell something to someone at a reduced price because we respect their veteran heritage or because we want to. In the end, as I hope you observed while you were at the meeting, is that we had a very robust discussion with our board members from all the various cities and counties that are members of the Council of Governments, which is virtually all of them here in the local region, and we were able to assist these individuals. If you would care, as you have said, to have a presentation from our executive director at the Council of Governments, you've already made it clear you'd like to, so I will ensure that that happens. And whether or not you want to undertake item D today or you want to wait for that presentation, I'm fine either way. I don't see a connection between the two, but if you do and you want to wait, that's fine.
Yeah, I would prefer to wait. I would like to see the presentation, and I have questions. And yes, I do realize MISA and Colotis are both members, but there's nobody representing them. And I think as chairman, you would try to recruit somebody from those areas to participate, because
We have in fact done that.
Well, I guess you haven't been successful then.
That's correct. Maybe you could help us
Persistence.
with that.
I already have been.
Good, thank you.
Persistence is a virtue, so it takes effort. But yes, we'll wait on item D until next week, and therefore, I think we're down to, I believe, Mr. Gonzalez, we have an executive session?
Yes, Commissioner, we do have a need for an executive session. This is RCW 42.30, 110, Section I, subsection I. Section 1, subsection I should say, in regards to potential litigation. And this should take around 15 minutes.
Okay, so at this time, we'll recess into executive session at 11:16. Okay, we are back to regular session. Just came out of executive session, and is there any other business for the good of the county?
I would just like to mention that Lourdes Counseling Center is now open, transition crisis triage facility, and where they're going to stabilize individuals with behavioral issues who are in crisis. So I think that's good news. I guess the ribbon cutting is coming up soon, but they are open now. So at least there is one more avenue for people in crisis with mental health issues.
All right.
Commissioner had a chance to visit them yesterday, took a great tour, so definitely a step in the right direction.
Good. All right. With no further business, this meeting is adjourned.